I would like to give you a very warm welcome to this session, specifically speaking on how we can accelerate the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement through payments. And specifically, we will be talking about it through the instrument that has been developed to support the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. Today, there will be two speakers. I will shortly be introducing the first speaker, and I will speak after that. And just to give you an idea of the session, we are going to start by just giving you a high-level view of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, why it is important for the AfCFTA, and then we'll talk about PAPSS itself, what it's doing today, and then the rest of the session we will dedicate the most time to, which is to hear from you through a Q&A session. So we look forward to this engagement, and without much ado, please allow me to introduce the first speaker. He is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of PAPSS. He hails from Rwanda, where before PAPSS he was the Director General at the Central Bank of Rwanda. So please allow me to introduce John Bosco Sebabi to take you through the first part of the session.
Thank you very much, Monica, and good morning, all. Everything in life begins with a story. So I'll begin with the story of PAPSS, go through where we are, and how we link with the AfCFTA and also with AfCFTA Bank. Then my colleague, Monica, will deep dive into what you actually need, what a payments and settlement system does. It does payments and settles. So I'll begin. So that's the story of PAPSS. The story of PAPSS begins a while back. The heads of state in May 1963, probably very few here were born, well, probably most of us were not born as yet. The heads of state of Africa said in Resolution 708 that Africa needs its own clearing system. That was a statement. What does that mean? This was 10 years before SWIFT came into existence. So had we started then, where would we be? But it's never too late, we are starting. But before that, there were debates in Africa. Where do we go as independent states? Do we go as one state and every state that becomes independent joins? Or do we take a more moderate approach? States become functional, strengthen up, and then integration happens later in Africa. Had you taken the first route, we wouldn't be here talking about PAPSS, talking about AfCFTA would be one country, trading. United States of Africa would be trading, and no integration issues would be being discussed today. But because the moderates always win, they won the debate of the day, and countries decided to become independent and form integration slowly. So that's where we are today. So that's the story of African integration and the story of African payments. Our forefathers who met in 1963 thought about it. Gladly, we are implementing it today. So I will go on to the next slide. And there comes the creation of the AfCFTA. So at the advent of the creation of signing of the agreement in Kigali, which was created the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which actually forms the biggest free trading zone in the world. Talking about 1.3 billion people, talking about a couple of trillions of GDP. So this vision is what PAPSS is there to support. And subsequently creating the secretariat to run with it, which is now domiciled in Ghana for the last, I think, 4 to 5 years. So, and how does AfCFTA Bank come into the story? AfCFTA Bank comes into the story because in its own establishment agreement in 1994, the governments that established the bank, plus the African Development Bank, they enshrined into the agreement that the bank will support payment arrangements to foster trade across Africa and outside Africa, Africa with the others and within Africa. So that gave it the mandate to run it. You may ask yourself what they didn't do at that time, but we needed an instrument to be able to start. So, and how does AfCFTA support PAPSS? One is the settlement bank, so it hosts all the settlement accounts of the participants. Monica will go through it in details, but also has approved $500 million as backup for settlement, to mitigate settlement risk. The biggest risk in the payment system is the settlement risk, or what we can also call credit risk, where one participant fails to settle, and then there has a ripple effect on the others. So AfCFTA has put a fund of $500 million for the existing PAPSS participants, and up to $3 billion for the whole continent once everyone joins in there. So these are funds to support the settlement and mitigate the settlement risk. And of course, AfCFTA has set up PAPSS, provided the technical support, has bought the system, has put in place. It has employed me and Monica and the rest to run it. So it's giving this and playing its mandate that was designed in the agreement. So how about PAPSS? What is PAPSS? I'll just go through the high-level transactions, how they move. Now, we have a bank in Ghana, have a bank in Kenya, and these banks are both signed on to PAPSS. We will go through the settlement models because we used to require the central banks to open the settlement accounts with us, but now even commercial banks can do it. So those details we shall get from Monica's presentation. But overall, if a client of KCB in Kenya walks into KCB and wants to pay a supplier in Ghana who is through GCB, they simply go to the bank. Now they can also use the mobile channel, give an instruction to the bank will send the message to PAPSS. PAPSS would inquire from the recipient commercial bank whether that individual, that firm can receive funds through the KYC. And if they confirm, then the money will be debited straight away and credited onto the account of the recipient. So that happens to date. Well, in our agreements, we provide for 120 seconds or 2 minutes, but we've been doing it averaging about 15 seconds. So there's an instant payment. And the following day at 11, the banks will settle between themselves. So it's a net settlement system and an instant payment system at the same time. I'm going through so that I can reserve more time for the technical presentations and also the questions. Now, what's the PAPSS ecosystem? There are 4 challenges of cross-border payments in the world. One, you have access. That means only banks today can access the global interoperative payment system. But the bulk of the institutions in Africa don't use these big banks. So we need to have banks, we need to have fintechs, we need to have everyone, the whole ecosystem, we need to have it all accessing the platform. How do we do it while respecting prudential norms? How we do it at PAPSS, we have a tiered approach. We have central banks that come in as regulators or as participants if they want to send transactions through to their clients on behalf of governments. Many central banks are banks to government. So they come in as regulators. We have commercial banks that come in as either direct participants that can send transactions and settle through their central banks, or they can settle on their own. So that's another set. But we also have banks that are supporting fintechs to come under them. And to date, we are discussing how we can bring in the big fintechs directly, so that we can have the whole ecosystem being accessing the system. The other challenge globally is transparency. Because there's so many touching points in the international payment system, so the transparency is lost somewhere. At PAPSS, we minimize that. It is the bank and the other bank across, or through their central banks. 3, there's the issue of cost. The cost of sending transactions across the world, and major in Africa, is too high. So perhaps we aim to provide this at the lowest cost possible. And the other is speed. Now, PAPSS offers instant payment, whereas sending a payment from Rwanda to Burundi, where you can drive for 3 hours, would take you 3 days, PAPSS will do it instantly. So this is the 4 challenges of global payment systems that we want to solve. Now, in Africa, we also had a few challenges. One of them is we are so much dependent on the hard currency. So we try to minimize this perhaps by netting off in local currencies, and only the net is settled in dollars. And why do we do this? We do this because there's a lot of imbalance in trade between countries. If one country is trading with the other, and you do it purely in local currencies, the net exporter will end up holding a lot of currency of their net importer, and they don't know what to use it for. They won't be able to use it. So we net it off and settle that in hard currency. We are working on an exchange rate mechanism to be able to do it currency to currency, African currency to African currency. But establishing an exchange rate mechanism requires time and data, but we have people in the bank, in the Afrexim Bank, who are running with that, who are going to come up with what we can do, so that in a few years we can have currencies trading within each other and being settled into each other. And as trade normally grows, currencies tend to align. So for now, we are using a net settlement system where we settle in hard currencies. So PAPSS also endeavors to have the best, to comply with international best practice. We are ISO 20022 compliant. We are ISO 27001 certified. We are also ISO 27701 certified. So we have all the certification that we've done on our system, and with independent certifiers. So as we can comply to the best practice. We have also gone through the assessment of the PFMIs, the Principles for Financial Market Infrastructures. These are set by the BIS through the Committee on Payments and Securities Commission. So we've done a self-assessment, and we've had the Bank of Ghana come to counter-check, and we've complied with all the principles that concern payment systems. Governance is a very important aspect of a payment system of this nature, of this magnitude. So what is PAPSS governance structure? PAPSS governance structure is constituted as follows. We have the PAPSS Governing Council, which is constituted by central bank governors of all member central banks or countries. And these take decisions on the rules, on the processes, on the whole governance and how we govern the system as a payment system. Below them, we've created a delegated authority to what we call the Payment Systems Oversight Committee. Now, these are technical people in the central banks that oversee payment systems. These are the directors of payment systems in those central banks. So they look at before any procedures, any processes are passed, before the governors look at them, it is the technical people that assess it. And that's why we picked a central bank, or they picked a central bank, to come and confirm and whether we are compliant with the PFMIs, which they did. So below that, we are also a business. Well, not a business to make profit, but at least an entity that should behave and act as a business. So we have the PMB, which is the PAPSS Management Board, which is the board of directors. And we picked people of repute in every field, in technology, in banking, in economics, to constitute that kind of level. And lastly, we have the PAPSS management team, which is my CEO, Michael Balu. He was supposed to be here, but he wasn't able to be here. Myself, our senior managers, Monica is one of them. So they're running different aspects: business development, technology, security, communications. So this is a whole team that is constituted by the PAPSS. So PAPSS as a key player for cross-border trade in Africa. And this is what I touched on in terms of PAPSS coming in to solve the 4 challenges of payments. So we facilitate trade by use of local currencies, and so we reduce the dependence on looking for a dollar by the institutions, and also reduce the cost. We've enhanced efficiency. You get your payments are done rapidly and in a maximum 15 seconds. Through the agreement, we cover ourselves up to 20 seconds, which is still a good speed. And also the issue of being accessible by all institutions that are involved in payments. So where are we today? We launched PAPSS in 2022 here in Accra, because Accra has always been the cradle for Pan-Africanism. And where are we today? We have 15 central banks. We have all the 6 countries in the WAMS region: Ghana, Nigeria, Guinea, Conakry, Gambia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and also we have Kenya in East Africa, Rwanda in East Africa. We have Djibouti in East Africa as well. We have Zimbabwe in Southern Africa, Zambia, and Malawi, and we have also Egypt more recently, and Comoros. So who are we speaking to now? We are speaking to BCAO, BEAC, that are coming on board very soon, Morocco, and DRC. So this constitutes the about 30% of African central banks. In terms of switches, we have 13 switches. And in terms of commercial banks, we've signed up 150 commercial banks, and we have about 90 technically connected. (150) are signed up, and about 90 of them are technically connected. That means they've interlinked the systems. We have partnerships with the Buna, which is a system that works between Africa, in the Arab world, between Africa and the GCC countries. So we were working on integrating that. We're also working on integrating with COMESA. Now, why do we do that? Because our principle and modus operandi is that we don't come to cannibalize or challenge an existing regional payment system. We come to enhance it and give it interoperability across Africa. So we have not only an MOU, actually, we've gone further an MOU with COMESA. They have what they call the regional payment and settlement system of COMESA, and we're integrating with them so that any payments to that region to another can go through PAPSS, and also PAPSS can pay to their region. And also with the Chinese, we've got an MOU with them to be able to, because Africa is slowly and actually rapidly trading with China so much, so we cannot leave them out. So I will stop here and let my colleague deep dive into the technical things of it. Because a payment and settlement system does 2 things majorly. It pays and then settles. And these are the most important things that you should understand how we do them and make sure that this is done so well. So thank you so much. I will stop here and hand over to my colleague Monica. She introduced me, so let me also take the time to. She's a Kenyan national. We fished her from the Central Bank of Kenya. She's got the experience in terms of SWIFT payments. And also she's been fundamental in the overseeing payment systems in that central bank. So she's the head of business and product development at PAPSS. Monica, welcome.
Thank you very much, Deputy CEO. And once again, it's a pleasure to speak to you this morning. Without much ado, let me tell you a bit more about PAPSS. So the core of our business is payments and settlements. And in that regard, we are able to do any type of payment. So frequently we get asked, what can you do on PAPSS? So whether you are dealing with your typical low-value payments, so things like remittances, for example, person-to-person payments, or you are a big business doing import and export in Africa and you're doing trade payments, you're doing high-value payments, we're able to do that as well. Second question we get asked frequently is, how do you access PAPSS? And I actually had a conversation on that this morning. So for us at PAPSS, we are the engine behind the people who are doing payments today. And so you wouldn't typically go into your bank and see, say, PAPSS as an application, for example. So we work with your banks to be able to provide that. For instance, in Ghana here, you can go to most of the banks. They offer it in their branches. A number of banks are also offering it through their mobile application. So when you go onto your apps, you would see the option to do a cross-border payment through PAPSS, and you can also do it through your bank's online banking. We have a number of use cases. I've mentioned some of them. So you can send business-to-business payments. You can send a business-to-customer. So, for example, paying salaries. You can send from a customer to a business, individual to a business. You can do person-to-person payments, and we also support the capital markets. So we are the settlement system for the African Exchange Link project, which is also connecting all the capital markets across Africa. So in addition to payments, one of the key things we are doing is settlement. And that's one of the problems that arises when you're sending payments across Africa. So for instance, if my bank in Kenya wants to facilitate a payment to a bank in Ghana, then they need to have a relationship of some sort. Typically, it's a correspondent banking relationship outside of Africa, which makes the transaction very expensive. It also means it takes a lot of time. So for us, that's one of the key value propositions we give to our participants, who tend to be today banks, to a certain extent fintechs as well, is we're able to settle for them. And as the Deputy CEO mentioned, we're able to do this at AfCFTA Bank. Now, because of the complexities that we have across Africa when it comes to payments, so you have countries that are very advanced. So for example, in this region, Ghana, Nigeria, very advanced. And then you may have other countries where their infrastructure, their payment systems are not so advanced. We developed a number of ways through which we can settle. And in simple terms, settlement is how we move money across the different banks. So we started with the central bank model, and here then we worked with central banks. They were holding accounts with us at AfCFTA Bank, and we were able to move money between them. Then we developed the commercial bank model. We found this is more valuable in markets where the exchange rate operates freely. So again, good example of that is Ghana. And as we have progressed, then we've looked at other models. So we have a model where AfCFTA Bank then plays that role of moving money between banks or fintechs. And the last one is a very special case in countries where they don't have sufficient banking infrastructure, especially the central banks. So they may pick a commercial bank to play that role. So the predominant model today is what we call the AfCFTA Bank the commercial bank settlement model. How that works is commercial bank will provide funds to us at AfCFTA Bank. They can set an exchange rate for their transactions, and I'll show you an example in a short while. They can initiate their payments in local currency and in special cases. So for instance, we have countries like Zimbabwe, which do not use the local currency. They predominantly use the dollars, and Liberia. So in those special cases, we allow them to do that. We don't involve the system of the central bank, the RTGS, and then we're able to do settlement on a multilateral net basis. And again, I'll just show you an example. Okay, so I know there's a lot going on here. but I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. First, to show you how the payments happen, but also how settlement happens as well. So I took the example of two banks. This is the top part of your screen. You have a bank in Kenya, you have a bank in Ghana. They need to send payments to each other, or their customers need to send payments to customers of the other bank. So they will do the first part, which is the most essential part of a payment, which is they need to pre-fund. So they need to provide funds for their payment. Today, because of the trade imbalances that Deputy CEO was talking about, we asked them to do this in dollars. Simply because today, for example, a Kenyan bank may not necessarily accept Ghanaian cedi, and Ghanaian bank may not necessarily accept Kenya shillings if you brought it to them. But we'll tell you what we're doing to address that. So both have pre-funded at AfCFTA Bank. What that means is come to this bottom part of the screen. Their customers can do their transactions in local currency. So, for instance, you have, I hope you can see this, but, oh, you can't see it? I'll try to talk to it. Yes, to make it better. Yes, so pre-funding has taken place, step one. Step two is the payments. Okay, so here you have a customer of Bank A in Kenya. They've sent a payment of 100,000 Kenya shillings. Maybe they have imported cocoa or chocolate from Ghana, so they need to make the payment to the person they imported from in Ghana. So they've paid 100,000. What happens with PAPSS is both banks provide rates for their transaction. So when this customer in Kenya is initiating, they know that by sending 100,000 Kenya shillings, using the rate for the day, in this case we used 5 as the rate, then the person they imported, the Ghanaian exporter, will receive the equivalent in Ghanaian cedi, even before they've done the transaction. So they know in Ghana, the person will receive 19,846. On the other hand, you can also have customer in Ghana making a payment. Maybe they're sending school fees, right? So they've sent their children to study in Kenya. They need to pay in Kenya shillings, so they've sent Ghanaian cedi in Ghana. In this case, they've sent 39,846. Again, using the rate for the day, then they will see that in Kenya, the school will receive 100,775 in Kenya shillings. So what PAPSS also does is it helps to reduce the burden for the banks. At a customer level, customer will only just know about this part, the actual payment. But at the bank level, because they have to manage liquidity, they need to have sufficient money for their customers to make payments. What we do is at the end of the day, we will net all the transactions that have been sent by their customers and all the transactions that are received by their customers. In this case, we're able to see for the Kenyan bank, it's 200,775. And we convert that position to dollars, and we do the same for the Ghanaian bank. So we see how much their customers have sent, received. Instead of paying the full amount, they pay a net of what their customers have sent and received. And then we do the final step, which is what we call settlement at AfCFTA Bank, where we will move funds. In this case, we find it's the Kenyan bank in that process that owes money to the bank in Ghana. So we'll debit funds from them at AfCFTA Bank, and we'll provide the funds to the bank in Ghana, also in dollars. So aside from that, we have a number of additional products. So we see ourselves as an infrastructure upon which anybody wanting to do anything related to cross-border payments in Africa, they can do it, and we build products upon that. So I'll just quickly share some of the things that we are doing. One of them has come as we expanded our initial offering, which is just the ability to do the payment. We call it the African Currency Marketplace. And this is a request that came to us from a lot of the large African businesses, so the airlines, the reinsurance companies, some of the commodity trading companies, and they had a very specific problem. So they came to us and they told us, give example of airlines, they sell tickets. So for example, Kenya Airways can sell tickets in Ghana, collect Ghanaian cedi, but need to repatriate it back to Kenya. And typically what they need to do, convert that to dollars, there's a cost for that, move that money across. So we developed the African Currency Marketplace because we met several companies like this across Africa, and essentially we're able to bring them together on one platform, and they can offer and exchange African currencies. So in the example I just gave, then we could also have a Ghanaian company that sold their products in Kenya, collected Kenya shillings, and we can match them with the Kenyan airline, so that in Ghana, the Ghanaian company can receive their local currency, and the Kenyan airline that has been looking to repatriate funds can also receive their local currency as well. So the other things we are doing, key one is putting PAPSS in the hands of as many people as possible, and this is in partnership with the banks. And this is deploying PAPSS to their digital channels, especially mobile banking and internet banking. And then I'm going to conclude with a specific case study, which is talking about the rollout and adoption of PAPSS in Ghana. So for us at PAPSS, we consider Ghana to be a success story when it comes to a system such as PAPSS, and I'll show you exactly why. So today in Ghana, we have 20 out of the 23 commercial banks that have joined us, which shows us that there's support across the financial industry. For PAPSS, of these banks, 80% are actively transacting, and 70% of those are on the model I just walked you through, the commercial bank settlement model. So why? Three simple reasons. One is Ghana's commitment to intra-Africa trade. As you know, the Secretariat of AfCFTA, the Secretary General of AfCFTA sits here in Ghana. This morning, somebody asked me if this was my first time in Ghana, and I said, no, I've been here a couple of times, though I've not been to this particular area. But whenever I'm in Ghana, we spend the most time with Africa Trade House, where AfCFTA is being implemented, and again, which just shows, and which Ghana actually provided to Africa to be able to provide intra-Africa trade. So that's one of the key success factors. The second is the regulator. And for us, we have seen, and we actually have a lot of central banks coming here to visit the Bank of Ghana to understand how they have been able to successfully roll out PAPSS. I think the most recent was Comoros. We also had Zambia, quite a number of central banks. But one of the things we as PAPSS enjoy is the full support of the regulator, and they have proactively communicated to the industry in terms of how to use PAPSS. And the final one, and this is again a story we like to share. So we know you recently in Ghana had an election. And during the election day, we saw the highest volume of transactions going through PAPSS. So we understood on those days your commercial banks were closed, but people were still able to trade across borders, especially in this region, through mobile banking and internet banking on their banks. So this is just showing Ghana's commitment to intra-Africa trade. Launch of PAPSS was again here, January 2022. That's when we commercially launched, and we had, I think, the then vice president, as well as president of Afrexim Bank, I think the governor of the Central Bank of Ghana, as well as the secretary of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement Secretariat. And this is just one of the many roadshows we've had here in Ghana, including also with the Ghana Union of Traders Association. So this is also just sharing with you, I think this is some of the banks, how they take the word out on PAPSS. So we hope you see some of your banks here as well. But we partner a lot with them in order to let the public know, their customers know how to send money across the many banks, the 150 banks we have on our network today. And with that, I come to the end of our presentation, and I will invite our Deputy CEO to come up on the stage so that we can do a Q&A with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Derek Tete from the Writers Project of Ghana, and I have two questions concerning the PAPSS and the Africa trade matter. So it concerns the commercial players in the various industries and those who will be transacting business across the continent, those already existing. You mentioned that 80% of transactions are being done by the governments, the banks in Ghana. I want to ask how much of work you are putting into financial literacy and also boosting the confidence of business people to patronize this PAPSS inter-operating system, to be confident in the banks enough to transact businesses across the continent and give their wares and their products, export and pay through the platform. My second question is...
So that I'm not writing, but the first one is very interesting. And thank you for that, because you are touching on the fact that how do we increase adaptability of PAPSS elsewhere the way it has been in Ghana. Actually, by showcasing Ghana's prosperity or Ghana's adoption of PAPSS to this extent, we wanted to show how the support of the central bank and the banking system, especially the central bank, is very important. Now, because of that support that we've had in Ghana, all these transactions talking about, my colleague mentioned, are going outside Ghana. So imagine if that was replicated for the 55 countries. So that means we actually will end up having all intra-African payments going through PAPSS, because this is a system that all countries own. But we understand this is a journey. It's a journey that involves spreading the word, talking, and also I mentioned my starting remarks that the heads of state who said that Africa should have its own clearing system did it in 1963. SWIFT came on board in 1973, 10 years after. So we can see that it takes a while for a system to be. 50 years now, SWIFT is the global, very strong player, and we came in 2022, almost 60 or 50 years after. So we understand that it's a journey. A system of this magnitude cannot take off in a second, cannot bring all countries together at the same time. But it's a journey we are having, and it's a strategic journey that we look at what's happening in regions. In the WAMS region, where we're operating, We got all the countries. Now we are looking at the COMESA, which has 21 countries. So bring on COMESA, that means you have 21 countries. We are also speaking to East Africa. Now East Africa has a different approach because the system is not centralized. So that means we have to speak to different central banks. We're doing that. And lastly, we're also speaking to SADC RTGS and also their retail system called the transaction cleared on an immediate basis. So that we have this already concentration of systems join us and then we move quicker. So thank you for the question, but this is how we are moving it, and we would like all countries to emulate Ghana's example. Central bank gives us support and things move. So this is how we are doing it, and we are trying to see that business people do adopt and use PAPSS. And the good news is that all the transactions we've done have been paid in 15 seconds. So that means we have lived up to our promise of speed. Thank you. The second one?
Okay, the second one is short. She mentioned that the banks are not actually paying like full payment. They pay just the net of the entire transaction. So it's like the charges on the banks, or the banks it's easy doing business with the system. So I want to know like your projections into the future, how more friendly the system will be, and what projections you have in terms of clients, the kind of clients you want to attract into the system. Thank you.
Yeah, so what we mean, and I'll let also Monica touch on this because she presented it, but in any payment system, or in banking generally, liquidity is very important. So a net payment system leaves room for banks to require less liquidity to be able to make payments, as opposed to a gross payment system that requires that if I'm paying you, if I owe you 80 million CDs, I pay, and then you owe me 50, I pay you 80, then you pay me 50. Sometimes I have to look for the 80, and you'll have to look for the 50. But if we net, I only pay you 30, and you don't pay me anything because of netted. Sometimes you don't have to look for any money because what I owe you, I pay, in simple terms, I pay myself the 50 and pay you the 30, the difference. So that reduces the requirement for liquidity, which is a big advantage to financial institutions. Monica, do you want to touch on it?
My name is Anthony, and I'm the founder of Block Finance. And at Block Finance, we are building a trade infrastructure where we are building a credit scoring system for small-scale enterprises and digital documentation management. So my question might be sensitive a bit. So considering what is going on right now in the BRIC nations, the SWIFT, so I'm thinking of Nigeria has become a partner of the BRIC nations already. So I'm thinking of is PAPSS thinking of becoming that partner where currency swap can happen, because in the BRIC nations, one of the elements they are looking at is to enable their member country to swap currencies instead of using a kind of maybe a central currency. They are going to swap currencies among themselves. So how is PAPSS going to enable small-scale enterprises or corporates in Africa to tap into this opportunity to save us from our currency depreciation?
Thank you very much, and it opens our eyes as well, what's happening around the world. And PAPSS is not a static or it's not a static system that we don't evolve. So what we began with is solving what is existing, the instant payment system. People are not sending money, it's taking 3 days, it's costing them this much. We solve that. I think my colleague touched on what we call the currency marketplace. This is a swap of currencies, because there was a problem of in many economies where currencies depreciated, so corporates that were investing in those economies were having trouble getting it out. So we come in to support anything related to payment, and that system is based on blockchain technology. 3, we have partnerships. I did mention that we have a partnership with CIPS, which is from China. So we are constantly cognizant of the fact that the world changes, especially the world of payments. And wherever we see a gap, we innovate quickly. So when we saw a gap of currencies being held or being not held intentionally, but not able to trade across, we say, well, let's have a currency marketplace to see how we can sort it out. Yes, many countries of Africa are joining BRICS, and there's no problem with it because the world is a global village. We are all supposed to trade with each other. However, we said, well, let's begin with sorting out everything African. And we don't rule out the fact that certainly we work with BRICS and China and India. We work with them. That's why we actually have that MOU with CIPS, the China Interbank Payment System. So even the BRICS, we are watching what's happening. Another area in terms of blockchain, because I think you said you work in the blockchain domain, we are currently working with the central banks to see where are they going with the central bank digital currencies. Where are they, how are they looking at it? So we're working with them, and that's why we have all of them as our governing council. So we are constantly watching that space. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Henry Lamte. I'm in the financial services sector. I have a quick question. You mentioned in trying to solve your currency convertibility problem of trying to match, should I say, different economies and on a need basis. I know about that. I used to see that happening when I was in the bank. But I'm trying to expand this a little further. Would you consider, or have you considered probably trying to, should I say, lean a bit more on something like the West Africa Monetary Institute to try and iron out their common currency, which would take out this dollarization issue and make things a little easier? Or have you considered maybe trying to explore some kind of a partnership with the international card schemes to try and get some kind of a payment platform around that? So that's my question.
Thank you, sir. And I think since you're in this domain as well, you've given a very good insight into that. Now, currencies are predominantly a central bank. Central banks are custodians of currencies. So we come in, and the demand for a currency or for money, historically, is for many things. For transaction basis, for savings, for precautionary measures, or whatever can come, you keep your cash. So we say, okay, now we're moving out of that money bit of it. We are playing into the providing the rails to make sure that payments are done more efficiently across Africa. First of all, before we talk about in what currencies is it done. Now the issue of which currency now do we do it in? Because we have 42 currencies in Africa. Because we have 42 central banks. Each central bank is running its own currency. Now we have BCAO region, we have the BEAC region that have 6 or 7, 8 countries in BCAO using one currency, which is a good thing. Now, our first objective as PAPSS is ensure that a payment from one country to the other in Africa is done efficiently. Countries in Africa are using many currencies. Some are even using hard currencies. But first objectives, let's make sure these rails are working professionally very, very well. We're also looking, and that is in terms of account-to-account payments. We're also looking into the domain of retail payments, interoperability, especially in the card payments. The card payments have the biggest or the highest rate of interoperability. So we are looking into that. We're looking at how do we now play into that domain. So that's previous I said that we are watching all the developments. We are playing the first objective of, say, make sure that payments are done efficiently, and then one by one, whatever we discover, we now come to support the systems. We are looking at those organizations to be able to support what they've done. They've done something, for sure, across Africa. But how do we now enhance, how do we work with everyone to make sure that the African payments landscape is efficient and cost efficient?
Thank you. My name's Rubio Fori. I'm a filmmaker, but interested in economics and development economics especially. I have a couple of questions. One is that the other gentleman was talking about the monetary union and convergence and all that. Does your existence make the goal of convergence irrelevant now? That's my first question. Second question is, for small countries like Liberia, what at all is the benefit of having their own currency, as opposed to sharing a currency with the bigger regional powers like Nigeria or Ghana? And thirdly,
let's start with the first one. I think before we...
It's about Nigerian oil. It's about Nigerian oil. Is it possible, for example, for Ghana to buy oil from Nigeria through PAPSS?
Oh, okay. And the first one was about regional criteria, the convergence criteria.
Is it still important?
I think that is these are very mind-opening questions, by the way. So Monica, please feel free to chip in. And I like the way the thinking is that we're now thinking about regional integration and that. Now, the convergence criteria for this, why do countries have a convergence criteria before forming an economic union? One is that no country should be a burden to the others. So if you, for instance, the criteria of you have to be a certain band of inflation, you have to have a certain percentage in terms of your debt to GDP, stuff like that. So the fact is that payments increase trade between countries. So with increased trade between countries, the criteria doesn't go away. But I believe that we get the criteria faster. If we are trading together, that means we actually we would get to we would be able to for instance, we would be able to get to the levels of inflation that they want, or maybe are kind of aligned. We would have to have certain criteria would move faster because of that increase in trade. So I don't think I can give you any more detail, but I think that once trade increases between countries, they can economically unite better and faster than others. You look at Europe. When Europe developed the Target 2, which is implemented, which is now being implemented, even Target 1, first of all, when they're using different currencies, trade increased so much. Intra-European trade is now over 70%. And that led them to actually creating one currency and creating one central bank to run that. So I think that payments are the underlying foundation for economic integration. Whereas it doesn't take away the criteria, the convergence criteria, but makes it move quicker. The other was a small country trading with the other. Why should they should have a currency? I believe that a smaller country, or even a bigger country, any country is trading with each other, it would be beneficial if they have one currency they're trading in, for sure. But that's the very reason we began with a story of PAPSS. Where does the story come from? I don't know if you had entered when I talked about the story, where African heads of state were debating in different places, in Monrovia, in Brazzaville, in Casablanca, and they were saying, some were saying, okay, can we just become one state so that every country that gets independence joins us, the way US did it. The others were like, let's take a moderate approach. becomes strengthened countries, then we get together as Africa. The moderates always win. Now, had we taken the first option, we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd be here talking about different things. Now that we didn't take that, we are here talking about integration and convergence criteria and all that kind of thing. So there's always a benefit for countries to trade within one currency. So whether small or big, I believe that countries, once they converge on a certain currency and use one, it's beneficial. But nevertheless, we are where we are. So I think that what should happen, let's increase trade between small countries or big countries. Let's just increase trade. And the benefits will be there. The third was the PAPSS offers a platform to pay whatever you're buying. As long as the recipient accepts that currency, PAPSS supports. You can pay $1, you can pay 1 cedi, you can pay 1 naira, you can pay 100 million naira, 100 million nairas, or $10 million equivalent, whichever. We are a platform, or we are a payment system.
Okay, just on the back of the response that you just gave, that the payment systems part of the agreement, I think is going pretty well. The trading part of it is straddling the payment. What can we do to improve the logistics around trading and the trading platform of AfCFTA so that the payment part will not be ahead of the trading? Because that's what we see. And the question that she asked, is Ghana able to buy oil from Nigeria, for instance? Of course, we can do that if there's a platform or an easy way of doing that. Okay, and if we have a program like this, I would expect that the trading part of AfCFTA would also feature strongly, just like we're having PAPSS demonstrating that there's an avenue for us to cross-border pay. There should be an avenue that shows us that we can cross-border buy seamlessly.
I think, please, go ahead.
All right, I can speak briefly to that. So this is why we work very closely with the Secretariat of the AfCFTA, because there is a recognition that there's the barriers that are there when it comes to payments, but there are also the barriers that are there when it comes to trade. As you're mentioning, logistics is just one of many of them. So what has been done to make this as practical as possible is to have a sort of pilot with some selected countries. Ghana's one of them, Nigeria is another country, Rwanda is another country, Kenya. And what has happened in this pilot is you actually then have the movement of goods. So I know, for instance, there was a consignment of tea that moved from Kenya to Ghana. With all the players just monitoring where the barriers are and where the interventions need to be. There are a number of initiatives, but using this very practical way, then it makes it easier to identify which are the high impact barriers that need to be addressed as quickly as possible. So for instance, you would have thought this consignment of goods would easily move. I think it moved by road. It was flagged off in Kenya. I think there were considerations to see if you could move it around the continent by ship as well, if that would be faster. But essentially, the approach right now is how do we do this practically, and then how do we learn from practical experiences where we need to make the quickest interventions to have the best impact.
Is it done or?
It is done, yeah. Sorry, it's ongoing. So this consignment, for example, I think it took 3 months. It was expected to take a much shorter time. But the lessons from that are being taken. I think the target was actually to see if it could take a month, for instance, right? So the learnings from that are now being taken to see how do we shorten that 3 months to a month. So what do we need to put in place? And it's not just from a logistics point of view, it's also from customs and taxes, yes, point of view as well.
We did one that is 6 months. So I'm surprised we have 3 months. So we want to be and learn from what else has been done.
I don't know if there's any SFTA person here, but there are so many barriers to trade. There's the physical infrastructure that we have, like roads, took 6 months for you. They are trying to make sure it takes 3 months or less. However, there's also the soft infrastructure part of it, where's the payment? Because before a consignment moves, the people must receive the money. So let's now quicken that reception of the money, and then now we look at, okay, and SFTA is doing a good job in looking at analyzing what are the other barriers to trade. How are we not trading very, very well with each other? There's other roads, they're looking at that. But also what has been hampering intra-African trade, it has been lack of information. People don't know what's being produced into the other. People can't do quick KYC on the others. So what the bank is doing as AfCFTA Bank, we have an ecosystem of a digital ecosystem of things. One is the PAPSS, which is the payment. 2, we have what we call Mansa. Mansa is the KYC kind of platform. If a company registers on Mansa, they have a unique identifier. So you can quickly do a check on it in there, a desktop KYC check. And 3, we also have the trade information system, whereby you have a company puts the information there if they subscribe, and then anybody can go into that and know what they are trading and know the regulation wherever they are producing from, what are the export regulations, what are the import regulations. So that kind of ecosystem is going to support the growth of the SFTA and implementing it very well. So it's a journey we've started, and a journey I think that we should support all of us and be able to run it in terms of what we've agreed under the SFTA to do.
One last follow-up point for that. For the payments, thank you. For the payments, it went through Citibank. And from the conversation of this morning, yourself and Monica, I would have thought that when I'm paying someone in Kenya, or somebody in Kenya is paying me for shea butter, the routing bank wouldn't be Citibank. It would be AfCFTA. We did provide AfCFTA details, sort code, what have you. And the bank said, oh no, we can't do this, so you need to change the bank details to Citibank. And then the payment went through in like 2 days or so. It went through before the 6-month nightmare started.
Yes, for payments go through PAPSS, the 2 commercial banks must be on PAPSS as well. So once we sign up a country, we now start to integrate technically. That means systems must talk. Usually this can take a bit of time because of the levels of technology, because of that this technology has to speak to the other, and all those kind of things. So as I said, that this perhaps will make a lot of sense if we have all the 55 countries on board and at least so many commercial banks joining. Now, this is still the nascent stage of starting. Many banks now, 80% of them in Ghana are on board. Kenya, we've signed up about 8 of them, and we now have KCB that has integrated. We have Access Bank and Equity Bank that are now in the process of integrating. So probably at that time, that those banks had not technically integrated and sent payments through. So this is a process. Of course, we have countries that have signed, but commercial banks will take a time to have their systems integrated, having their project management. So it's a journey, I would say. And sometimes you may walk into a bank and it's not yet ready. So they're not going to tell you don't transact. They will use the traditional system they're using, but if you go back after they've integrated, PAPSS will be there. That's why there's a massive campaign in Ghana, because most banks are on board and they're trading, and they're using PAPSS to send transactions.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a lonely journey for Ghana right now, trying to trade with other countries on the continent. It's very difficult. So if there are other countries in this room, please send a message. Ghana is open for business, and we want you to open your doors as well so that we can trade with you. We can't trade with ourselves.
That's a good message. I wish it was recorded and sent out.
Thank you very much. My name is Hudu Yahya. I'm an accountant and a lawyer. My question is just related to what she asked, so I don't really have much to say. What I was going to say is about the volume of trade among African countries. Because I believe once we have a higher volume of trade among us, there will be a higher utilization of PAPSS. For instance, if you look at issues of importing of oil, Ghana, we import a lot of oil, let's say about 400,000 metric tons within a month. And these products, once we import them into the country, we need to sell in cedis, get the money in dollars, and pay the suppliers. And usually when there is liquidity challenges with regards to dollars, it becomes difficult for the Ghanaian cedi. So when you observe in 2022, for instance, we had some serious challenges with regards to Ghana cedi's depreciation. So we are only hoping and urging AU to try and then promote intra-African trade. Once we have a higher volume of trade, I think the use of PAPSS will be massive. Thank you. So she has already asked.
I think let me just touch on that a bit, which is very good. The volume of trade is low. Understand it's about 14, 15, 16, or 16% once they include the northern African countries. Sometimes they like to exclude them and will drop to 15 or 14%. Absolutely. Africa has the lowest intra-trade. Europe is beyond 7%. US is, the Americas are beyond 50%. I guess the Asians are also very far. But payments and lack of information play a big role here. So whereas PAPSS would improve, of course, trade and introduce efficiencies. The major things that we don't know what is produced in other countries. I'll give you an example. When we're launching PAPSS, or about to launch PAPSS here in Ghana, we were looking for bags to give our delegates. We had ordered bags from the UK because we didn't know where bags are. We said UK has bags. Ordered them, but we hadn't paid. So when we went for the Intra-African Trade Fair in Durban in November 2021, we actually, my CEO was moving around and he landed on a lady from Ethiopia selling very nice bags. So he told me, "Bosco, come and see." I said, "Yeah." When I saw them, I said, "Well, we don't have a choice. We cancel what was in Europe." One, the price was like half or 30%. It is in Africa. So instantly bought them. So lack of information, and that's why Afrexim Bank has created that digital ecosystem. Information, KYC, payments. So that once we have all our entities registered in those three, then intra-African trade will increase.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ibrahim Mohammed. I'm an attorney at law, specialized in real estate investment. My question is on payments. What does PAPSS regard as payment? Because from what has transpired so far, I have the notion that it only involves money. But of course, we know that there are other instruments of payment and there are different kinds of payment. And I just want to have a firm understanding on what constitutes payment within your framework, within your system. Thank you.
Simple terms, it's just the movement of value. Yes. So that can be maybe just using an example, if someone wants to pay for an investment they've made, a property they've made in another country, they can make an instruction through their bank, and we would then make sure that the person selling the property, for example, receives that value in their account in their local currency. Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Edmond. I just want to find out, I know PAPSS is a journey, but what is your presence in most of the French-speaking countries? I mean, Ghana is surrounded by Burkina, Togo, and then Ivory Coast. So we do a lot of trades with them. And I don't know what is the roadmap for these countries. I mean, we have about 26 French countries, but I hardly see your presence in those places. What is the roadmap to it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very good observation. It's a good observation because, as you're rightly saying, we only have maybe Djibouti, Comoros now, the core of the French countries are within those regions of Central Africa, which is BEAC or CEMAC, and also the Bissau region. So, Umewa region. So what we are doing with them, in our bid to work with central banks, we have Guinea-Conakry, which is part of WAMSI, it is part of us, but we're now focused and majorly focused to see how Bissau as a bank, central bank, and BSA can be part of us. And the journey is progressing very well. Last month we were in BEAC, myself, my CEO, and the president of the bank. We're meeting the governor, and they're actually committed to getting into PAPSS very quickly. Monica and her team also had, and I was also in Bissau last year, and these two governors are coming on board. So once they come on board, we'll have 6 plus 8, that's about 14 countries, Francophone countries on board. Then we shall now go to the other individual countries as well. We are talking the DRC to be able to join. So then that region, we are now focused on it for, at least we should have it before end of the half year.
All right. So my name is Collins Boma. I'm a friend of the banks in the country. In fact, all the banks. Undoubtedly, PAPSS is an efficient tool for payment and settlement, and we congratulate you for coming up with such a platform relative to efficiency and, for that matter, the turnaround time for settlement and other things. Arguably, I cannot stick my neck out when it comes to cost, but then the turnaround time, you've given us, did you say 15 seconds? I heard you mentioning 15 seconds. Is that the case in terms of the turnaround time?
Well, I said that in our agreements, it's 120 seconds maximum.
Right.
So once a transaction hits that 120 seconds, it times out. So it has to go through within 120 seconds.
That's fine.
But what we've done today, what we've experienced today, we are around 15 seconds. So,
okay.
But we give ourselves room for.
Even with the 120 seconds, we'll give you thumbs up for that. My challenge is with the safeguards. I heard you also mentioning on the fact that, yes, the platform is integrated to the banks. I don't know the extent to which it is fully integrated to the bank's core banking applications. But if it is not fully integrated into the bank's core banking application, then the real issue relative to security primarily sits with yourself and not necessarily the banks, although during onboarding, the banks are expected to do what they call what they have to do to safeguard they themselves. So they have to do some kind of a risk assessment to see the extent to which the systems are secured. Now, I heard her mentioning the fact that at the end of the year, for instance, there was a spike in transfers and settlements, primarily from Ghana. That is where I have a little bit of challenge. To what extent do we even know that the transfers were premised on genuine transactions, or for that matter, other motivated activities? So my issue has to do with safeguards, countermeasures, controls, preventive measures that we need to be assured of, that if we have to leverage on the platform for payments and settlements, this same system is not going to be used by the adversaries to perpetrate fraud and financial crimes. What is the level of comfort that you give us that this system is strong, is safeguarded, the controls are very strong to prevent adversaries from tapping into it and using it for their parochial interests? Thank you.
Yes, I'll answer, and then I'll also let my colleague also answer and go into a bit of a detail. I'm not a technology person, but I'm a payments person, and globally I have overseen payment systems, and this is how it is done. So internationally, we have what we call the principles for financial market infrastructures, which have certain safeguards in terms of technology, in terms of operations, how it operates. So we've gone through assessments for that at our level, self-assessment, and also invited experts to come and assess. And as I said, there are globally 18 principles for financial market infrastructures. Now, financial market infrastructures have several things. You have a payment system, you have a security settlement system, you have central counterparties and all that. So out of the 18, you have 16 that take care or are purely for payment systems. The others are shared around. Now, we are compliant to all, according to the Bank of Ghana. So that's an independent assessment. So that's the level of now the whole payment system being compliant to international principles and best practice. Two, we have our security, enterprise security department, which looks at the security. But to be able to ascertain that this is to the levels that we want, to the international levels, we have certifications that we've gone through. I named a few, ISO 220021. So I think she will have to show us the details of it. So we've gone through those certifications. And three, before a bank connects to us, yes, of course, there's a connection with the core banking. So that the bank itself checks, where am I connecting? That level of check. The second level of check that our system wants to integrate with banks, we open it up to the central bank also to look and say, okay, this system is compliant to international best practice. The transaction that went through at the end of the year, the spike was based on one thing, that the banks in Ghana actually put PAPSS on their mobile channels. What does that mean? In your comfort of your bedroom, you can send a payment through PAPSS. So that was, once that was done, and it's also end of year selection time, many people were able to send out transactions. So this is that's why we say that if we have all the banks adopting PAPSS on the digital channels, which you can do, send a transaction in the comfort of your car, in the comfort of your bedroom, when you're having coffee in a restaurant, that increases the volumes. And even with that drastic spike, we didn't get any complaints, any fair transaction. The recipients received their monies, and the senders also were debited very well. So maybe I'll let Monica go through the details of the certification that we have that assure the security. Let's first assure this gentleman about our security before we move on.
Yeah, so just to add to the Deputy CEO, so we have certified PAPSS against the international standards for data security, data privacy, business continuity, but in addition to that, we have at the center of our payment system, we have anti-money laundering solutions. So any transactions that, and we do it against global and African Union checklists. So anything that doesn't meet that standard is just rejected immediately. We do the same for sanctions as well.
Thank you, Edmond, once again. My question is, payments done by the banks for PAPSS per day is $20,000. How are you negotiating with Bank of Ghana for an increase in such amount? Because I remember when 2022, when you launched it, the rate there was around 8, but now currently we are between 14 per the dollar. CD to dollar. So volumes have increased. Some people come in maybe to the banking hall after 4, and we had exceeded the payment for that day, and you have to push it to the next day. So I don't know, how are you going to negotiate? Or maybe you are still in negotiation with BOG.
So
Thank you.
That's a good observation, and Monica deals with these people on a daily basis. She'll also compliment. So that was caused primarily by our first model of settlement. The first model of settlement was that the central bank is the settlement agent, so settles for everyone. Absolutely, you can see that puts pressure on its own reserves to do the settlement. So Bank of Ghana, the first step, allowed us to operate the commercial bank settlement model, where commercial banks do their own settlement and they don't have a limit, because already the commercial banks are doing this, what we are doing today. They are opening up nostro accounts within Citibank, within Deutsche Bank, everywhere. So what you are saying is that open those within Afreximbank, so our intra-African transaction can go faster. So that's the only thing we're saying, and Bank of Ghana has supported that very, very well. All those banks that she talked about are within the commercial bank settlement model. So we're going to see this changing, and volumes moving up, and limits not being so restrictive as they were, because it was. Imagine if you are the one putting settlement funds from your reserves as a central bank, that you set a limit, but once you let it up. This is what's happening today. The banks do the payments. That's their job. They're already doing it. You only bring in the efficiencies of having instant payments within Africa. So that is going to change. And that we've talked to them, and we've arrived at let's implement the commercial bank settlement model, and that will remove those restrictions. Maybe you can add what's happening.
Yeah, I think the Deputy CEO has covered it all. So today, why we're actually seeing increasing volumes from this market is because most of the banks are funding their own transactions at AfCFTA. So there's no restrictions in terms of limit.
I wanted to ask if there's been any study of the benefits to African countries of using PAPSS and trading more with each other that they also know about.
Well, I wouldn't say a study as such, because a study is a deep analysis of what's happening. But before we set up the system, we looked at what's happening, and we analyzed the issues in intra-African trade as one, physical infrastructure, which is Afreximbank and countries are trying to solve around. Two, we're looking at the non-tariff barriers, because the tariffs which are known, The non-tariff barriers, you had infrastructure, you had information flow, you had entities not fearing to trade with each other because they don't know each other. That means there's no KYC. And then the payments. So that's why the bank came up with a digital ecosystem to provide these three, to make sure that these three are more efficient. Then the physical infrastructures, of course, like roads and airports, governments can deal with, or AfCFTA can deal with, or a solution can be found, and it is being found. And also the tariff barriers, then now AfCFTA can always deep dive into all that. We know that AfCFTA has set up the adjustment fund, because within a free trade arrangement, countries will be able to drop some tariffs from goods that are coming or being exported into Africa. And once a country experiences some kind of glitch, then the adjustment fund can support them until they get to a level where they're comfortable. So these kind of things, even if there was no deep study, but we looked at these kind of barriers in a kind of an analysis of what is happening around.
I just wanted to add a bit to that. So Afrexim Bank has actually done a lot of studies. So I think what comes to my mind is I think it's DRC or Congo that produces copper. And some of that copper is used to make the electric cars. So the study they did was to see the effect of now moving the global productions to a country like that, just because they are the main producer of this commodity. Something similar, I think, for either Liberia or Sierra Leone when it comes to tires, because they produce a lot of rubber, and they also showed the effect of now being able to have these countries as a hub when they're moving from just having these raw products to manufactured goods and making them hubs for some of these industries, specifically the automobile industry. So on Afrexim Bank, on their website, they've done a lot of studies to see the impact of doing that.
My name is Richard. A quick one. Does PAPSS have plans to integrate with ATMs?
ATMs?
Yes, across Africa.
Yes. In payments, we are now dealing with the PAPSS presented is on account to account. Now, we are looking at how do we enter the retail payments as well, including ATMs. Because if you look at today, if you use your Visa or MasterCard, still the transactions routed in the US and costs become high and kind of thing. It's quick, but costs are high. So we are also looking at that kind of how do you do this? Yes, we are looking at trade, but trade comes with people moving from one country to the other. And once they move, they use cards. That's one area. But also look at the mobile money sector. In Africa, the mobile money sector is really, really advanced. And it's actually used a lot, and it's at least interoperable. It's not interoperable at all. So we are looking at those things. How do we make sure there's interoperability in these retail payment systems? We're working with banks, discussing with central banks as well, to see how do we now play into that area as well. So that's on our radar. We are watching it.
I'm Liman A. Mohammed, and I apologize for coming in late. I'm not too sure if the questions I'm going to ask have already been addressed. The first question I have is around the system. It appears to be a single system that is integrated by all the partners that are connected to it. I'm not too sure of what mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that it's reliable. Because with a trade, you require to be able to meet certain contractual obligations in terms of payments. And if the systems are not working, because you are integrating into other countries' systems, which may have issues here and there. So what I want to find out first and foremost is how reliable the system is to ensure that, you know, there's smooth transactions of trade. The second issue I want to also ask is around currency fluctuation. When I entered, I think you were trying to address that. I don't know whether there's a mechanism to be able to hedge against currency fluctuations. Because when you enter into a contract and you are supposed to pay certain amount over a period of time, some of the payments will be future. And you may agree on a particular currency. And as at the time you entered into the contract, you would have agreed on a certain currency. And maybe by the time you are paying, and the value is going to be realized in another country, and you may not know what the circumstances will prevail at that time. So you may end up not getting the value that you have signed on in your contract. So in effect, I want to find out whether there's any mechanism to have a hedge, so that if I agree that the transaction is 100 Ghana cedis, and I'm supposed to pay 50 Ghana cedis today, and then in 6 months' time, another 50 Ghana cedis, I'm sure that whatever value I'm giving at that time for it to be realized in another country, you know, will be that value. Then finally, I want to find out, this is cross-border transaction. If there's a dispute in terms of the transaction, is there a mechanism in place to resolve it, or it has to go through the normal or traditional system of addressing the dispute? Thank you very much.
Let me start with that. Let me start with the last one. The agreements we sign, we have a dispute resolution mechanism within PAPSS. And that's why we sign agreements with banks. That's why we sign with central banks. There's a dispute resolution mechanism, which is faster. It doesn't go through the usual court and stuff like that. We have on our board, we have also an appeals committee. In case individuals or parties didn't agree, there's an appeals committee to look at that. But there's different levels in our dispute resolution mechanism. It is there, it is firm, and that's why I started with that answer, because it was straightforward.
Sorry, so does it oust the jurisdiction of the court? So assuming you are not satisfied with that mechanism, does it oust?
Well, if you're not satisfied with the appeals committee decision as well, that's when you can only resort to that.
Okay. Because
we want to make sure that disputes are solved immediately. But normally, it also has levels of arbitration, it has courts of law, so it has that process. But that process kicks in if you have not, or if you're not satisfied with the appeals committee resolution or the arbitration mechanism. That's when courts kick in. Now, on your first question, that are we, it was on integrating systems
and reliability.
Now, systems are integrated from the banking side, and before we start transactions, tests are done to ensure reliability, to ensure that everyone's comfortable with it. So this is how the process of implementing a payment system goes. Systems are set, analysis done on each side, and how they can talk to each other. Once that's established, they begin the work, and then they test within the test environment, and then they switch on to the live environment. And what we do, an extra check within the live environment, we allow small value transaction to go fast, to go before we open it up to high values. So once that is done and established, then we kick off. So that's the most we can do to check the reliability of systems. And so far, nothing has gone wrong. On the second, which was most important, about hedging. Now, hedging comes in when you can sign futures contracts between parties. That's one part of the financial market infrastructure. Financial market infrastructure, as I said, there are three parts. There's a payment system, there's the security settlement system, there's also the central counterparty, and this is a depository. Now, it's the central counterparties that normally would ensure that that futures contract is kind of, they take risks on both sides. And the payment system now makes sure money moves from here to there. So the payment system, whereas that can be an arm of PAPSS, but can't be done in PAPSS, because we're transferring value from here to there, and done. Then the rest of the contracting can be done through a central counterparty, which is a good point you're putting out, that maybe in Africa we need to come up with central counterparties that can do this kind of transactions, especially in the commodities, because Africa is commodity based. So that can also be done. Afrexim Bank or any other entity can set up this kind of infrastructure as well to do that. But payment systems that we move a payment from Ghana, once you are ready to move a payment to him, we move it. And then your contracting is between you and the other party. And somebody else can become central to counter, to be able to safeguard that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my name is Joe Olata. I'm a trade finance consultant. So my question is, I was a bit late, so my question is PAPSS more like going to eliminate the use of SWIFT? That's my first question. Because you were saying that you will not have to, somebody was saying she had to send the money, it was routed through Citibank, he had to come to Ghana, which means they had to use a SWIFT network and all of that. So my question is PAPSS coming to eliminate the use of SWIFT? And two, if it is going to eliminate the use of SWIFT, as time goes on, you were saying per day is 20,000 USD per day for payments for as a per institution or company. So I was saying that as time goes on, maybe there will be increases. And in Africa here, we do a lot of, apart from doing payments directly, we also have the use of instruments. Would there be an opportunity where PAPSS will now come into place, where the use of instruments will also come into place, where we don't have to now SWIFT instruments through SWIFT, do SWIFT instrument to somewhere before it comes back to the bank here in Africa? Or we will say, okay, we are PAPSSing it. Let me see, put it quote on unquote, we are PAPSSing it rather, where the instrument will now go through PAPSS and then go to the African bank if it's an inter-African trade. How are we looking to do that? That's if we are, PAPSS is going to be maybe say a rival to SWIFT. That's my question.
We are here not to displace anybody, but we're here to increase efficiency in terms of the 3-4 challenges I talked about in Africa, because our mandate is Africa. We are here to make sure that payments are done efficiently and very quickly at a very low cost. There's transparency, everyone can follow the payment, and also access by everyone. So that's our mandate. We partner with anyone who is playing in this domain, but we don't come to say we're going to replace so-and-so, going to replace so-and-so, remove so-and-so. That's not our mandate. Our mandate is efficiencies in payments across Africa. And yes, PAPSS it across Africa, and that's what Messi was saying it, so that you can gain from those efficiencies. My colleague can add.
Yes, I think I would only just re-emphasize what you've just said, which is SWIFT is a global system. PAPSS is very focused on how we can help payments to move easily within Africa. So no intentions to replace it, but just to give people a means to move money easily when they want to across Africa. With regards to the instruments, I think as we enhance the products, it's some of the things that we look into. So if you are needing a certain instrument for trade, and maybe today you have to use another system to do it, then we are also seeing how to incorporate it into PAPSS to make that part of the seamless process.
I think so. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, let me thank you so much. It's not, I don't think I've spoken this long in a while, but seems every minute I was speaking, which shows me that, or shows us that there's great interest in PAPSS and great hope that you have in us. And we on our side also looking at you are the biggest supporters. I mean, we have a cross-section of people, traders, bankers, trade finance specialists, lawyers. This is incredibly very good. And thank you so much. On behalf of the AfrixBank President, Professor Rama, on behalf of my CEO, Mr. Michael Balu, and on behalf of my colleagues at AfrixBank and at PAPSS, we appreciate the work that the African people do for us, and more importantly, in Ghana, which, as I said before, is and has always been the cradle for Pan-Africanism. So we look at you as our biggest champions, and thank you very much. You've done it very well, and we look forward to working with you in the future and also to implement many other things that we are thinking about. Thank you so much.